Beneath the surface of ordinary family life, these parents are brutally killed by the children they raised. In this shocking compilation, a son's brilliance hides a deadly rage, a daughter's love turns into a savage attack, and dark secrets lead to gruesome betrayals. These are the moments where family ties snap and trust is paid for in blood. On October 28, 2014, the Long Island town of Farmingdale was preparing for Halloween. Houses were decorated with fake cobwebs, pumpkins, and jack-o'-lanterns. But what unfolded on Secatogue Avenue was not a scene from a horror movie. It was real. Derek Ward, a 35-year-old man with a history of mental illness, including bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, was living with his mother, Patricia. Neighbors described him as a quiet, unassuming figure who was often seen helping his mom with groceries. 66-year-old Patricia was a beloved language arts professor at Farmingdale State College, with nearly 3 decades of teaching experience. She was his sole caretaker after losing another son, Robert, to a heroin overdose in 1997. Though Derek had a lengthy history of mental illness, including arrests for weapons possession and drug charges, neighbors described the mother and son's relationship as unusually close and codependent. Patricia seemed extremely protective of her troubled son, witnesses recounted, often asking if he had his wallet and keys when they were out. But Derek's psychological condition had severely deteriorated following his grandfather's death. Derek had recently been released from a psychiatric facility and was supposed to get medication refilled in a couple of days. But they would never make it to the appointment. That was just days away. Neighbors recall Derek becoming increasingly erratic as his unmedicated condition deteriorated. One evening, Patricia had simply dropped a fork, and the noise made her son fly into a rage. Her brother, Robert Lubrana, recounted. She pleaded with him to go to the ER, but he refused, according to Lubrana. It wasn't the first time Derek had lashed out over seemingly small things. Lubrana recounted an incident a few months prior when Derek became incensed that Patricia was making too much noise cooking him dinner. The mundane clatter of pots and pans set Derek off into a frenzy of anger that took hours to diffuse, Lubrano said. On another occasion mentioned by Lubrano, Derek had an outburst when Patricia's television was too loud, prompting a heated argument where he claimed the noise hurt his head. These displays of volatility over small stimuli had become more frequent and concerning for Patricia in recent months. She pleaded with him to go to the ER, but he refused. On that fateful October night, Derek's long simmering demons finally erupted in an unimaginable way. Inside the small apartment they shared, he ambushed his mother, Patricia, savagely attacking her with a large kitchen knife. Neighbors were oblivious to the struggle as Derek overpowered the 66-year-old woman, stabbing her repeatedly and breaking several of her ribs. In a final act of brutality, he used the knife to decapitate Patricia, severing her head from her body. But the horror didn't end there. Covered in his mother's blood, Derek dragged her decapitated body outside and kicked her severed head 20 feet down the street, witnesses said. Neighbors watched in shock as the grisly scene unfolded before their eyes on this night meant for make-believe scares. One witness described passing by the scene in her car and doing a double take at what she thought was a dummied Halloween head lying face down in the road, with long black hair fanning out. One neighbor even tried to pick up what he thought was a dummy before realizing the sickening truth. As police began arriving on the scene, Derek had already slipped away, fleeing the carnage he had unleashed upon his own mother. Less than a half hour later, authorities received reports of a man struck by a train less than a mile from the crime scene. When officers arrived, they found Derek's mutilated body on the tracks. He had taken his own life by jumping in front of the oncoming locomotive in the wake of decapitating his mother. At the apartment, investigators uncovered a scene of unimaginable brutality. Based on the trail of blood and evidence of a prolonged struggle, it appeared Derek had chased his mother through the home, leaving behind walls and floors drenched in her blood. The knife, believed to be the murder weapon, its blade stained with Patricia's DNA, was recovered in the kitchen near her butchered remains. On a night meant for harmless tricks and treats, the town of Farmingdale was forced to confront a real-life nightmare from which it may never fully recover. After a night of horror, another mother's love would soon be met with unimaginable betrayal. It was a crime that shook Frostproof Florida to its core. How could a beloved elementary school teacher be so brutally murdered by her own son? 46-year-old Elvia Espinoza was the brightest of lights in her world. Colleagues and neighbors described her as always cheerful, kind, and devoted to her students and family above all else. Her oldest child, Marisol, remembered her as always full of life and their biggest supporter. But it was her youngest, 21-year-old Emmanuel, who appeared to be Elvia's pride and joy. A supposed genius and pre-med student at the University of Florida, Emmanuel had graduated at the top of his high school class. His future shone as bright as his 4.1 GPA. Little did anyone know that behind Emmanuel's achievements lay a disturbing darkness. On April 6, 2024, he made the 2-hour drive from Gainesville to his mother's home in Frostproof, claiming he was coming to attend a family event. But he had other intentions, a twisted plan taking shape on that drive to finally put an end to what he said was years of pent-up irritation towards his mother. Ring camera footage shows Emmanuel calmly approaching the door, butcher knife hidden behind his back. Elvia opened up the door while on the phone with a relative, excited to see her son. But, not saying a single word, Emmanuel started stabbing her over and over again as she desperately screamed, "Manny, Manny," but her cries could not be heard. Emmanuel had put on his AirPods, blasting the song "No Church in the Wild" to drown out her pleas. Applying lessons from his pre-med biology courses, he stabbed methodically, targeting areas he knew would cause maximum trauma and blood loss. For nearly 10 minutes, the horrific assault continued, Emmanuel's knife repeatedly plunging into his mother's body. When she fell to the floor, he continued the assault, stabbing her every time she tried to get up or her hands kept moving. He stabbed her over 70 times in total, only stopping when Elvia finally lay motionless. In a sickening confession later to police, Emmanuel admitted that in the moments after, as he washed his hands in the kitchen sink, he almost asked his dead mother for a Band-Aid when he noticed his hands were cut from gripping the knife. It was only then that the depravity of his actions seemed to hit home. He immediately called 911 and confessed to murdering his mother.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, tell me exactly what happened.
I killed someone.
Okay, I've got help on the way. Stay on the line. What? Stay on the line with me, okay? I've got help on the way for you, okay? Okay, sir. Okay, I want you, yes, sir, I want you to take everything out of your pockets, and I want you to keep your hands out of your pockets, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how did this happen?
I opened the door and I stabbed my mom.
Investigators were baffled by Emmanuel's lack of a clear motive. There was no history of abuse, substance issues, or mental illness in the family. Manny was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time of the murder. When asked by investigators about the relationship, he rated it about an 8 out of 10, saying he really loved his mother, but that she irritated him. He revealed to detectives that he had a deep resentment towards Elvia because she got on his nerves, and claimed he had wanted to kill her for years before deciding to go through with it that day. Emmanuel was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He cooperated fully with the investigation. However, Florida state prosecutors have announced their intent to pursue the death penalty against him for the brutal murder of his mother. As one family grapples with a senseless loss, a father's life is about to be shattered by his own child. But this unthinkable tragedy had even darker roots. a sordid history of lies, infidelity, and whispers of abuse that fractured the family long before the unimaginable crime. Daniel Halseth was by all accounts a man dedicated to his children. He broadcast his life to the world on social media. He was a father of 3, with his youngest, Sierra, being the apple of his eye. He would often share glimpses of his life, filled with music, photography, and selfies with Sierra. Sierra was a former beauty pageant contestant, and had once been a bright, happy child. But in recent years, her relationship with her father had become strained. There were hints of conflict, as Daniel struggled to maintain a connection with her amid the complexities of their family dynamics. Daniel and Sierra's mother, Elizabeth Helgelian, had been locked in a bitter custody for years. In October 2011, shortly before the couple divorced, Daniel was arrested on suspicion of open and gross lewdness after allegedly trying to force his wife into sexual activity. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor counts of coercion and battery and was sentenced to 6 months probation. A month later, he filed for divorce, claiming Elizabeth was unfaithful. After their divorce in 2011, Elizabeth was granted primary custody of their 3 children, but the arrangement was frequently contested by Daniel. In May 2020, Daniel had asked to see Sierra for a couple of weeks, but that stay soon became a permanent arrangement. Elizabeth was concerned about her daughter's well-being after her siblings made a police statement alleging Daniel had tried to coerce them into drinking alcohol during their visits with them. During the custody hearing, Daniel had been told to return Sierra to her mother's house, but Sierra ran away and went back to Daniel's house. A judge handling the court battle already noticed signs of potential problems months before the teen would commit a deadly act.
I am concerned with regard to what has happened, with regard to the lack of contact between the child and the mother, and certainly I don't know who's to blame at this point in time. But I saw a lot of things with regard to Sierra that causes me some concerns. Her inconsistency in the stories, depending on who she's talking to and when, comparing her interview with the Family Mediation Center with her interview with Child Protective Services, it indicates to me that something else is going on with Sierra. I don't know yet what that is, whether that's parental alienation, whether that's human trafficking, whether that's manipulation, and I don't know who at this point is to blame for that.
This ongoing battle created a tense environment for Sierra, who along with her 2 other siblings was caught in the middle of her parents' disputes. It was during this time that Sierra met 18-year-old high school graduate Aaron Guerrero, who she met online. Their relationship began in June 2020, and it quickly became intense. The teens were deeply infatuated with each other, to the point where they began making plans to run away together. When their parents discovered this, they forbade the couple from seeing each other. But the 2 continued their relationship in secret, setting the stage for the tragedy that would soon follow. In the early hours of April 8, 2021, Aaron ran away from his home and joined Sierra at Daniel's house. What happened next was a brutal and premeditated act of violence. Later that day, Sierra and Aaron withdrew hundreds of dollars from a bank account Daniel shared with one of his other ex-wives and went on what seemed like a mundane shopping trip. CCTV footage captured the couple purchasing a circular saw blades, bleach, lighter fluid, disposable gloves, and a drop of cloth from several stores near Daniel's home. They appeared calm and collected, as if they were simply running errands. But the items they purchased would soon be used in a crime that would horrify even the most seasoned investigators. Back at the house, the 2 ambushed and attacked Daniel with sharp force, causing fatal injuries. They then attempted to dismember his body using the circular saw, but ultimately gave up, setting fire to his remains in a bid to destroy the evidence of their crime. An autopsy report would later reveal that 42 of the 70 stab and cutting wounds were to the back of the body, indicating that 2 attacked Daniel from behind. The 2 fled the scene in Daniel's car. Meanwhile, Daniel's mother was having a hard time tracking him down. She called Sierra, who claimed that her father's phone was broken and that he was unavailable. When she threatened to call the police, Sierra hung up. At this point, Daniel's mother contacted Daniel's landlord, asking to check on him. Peggy arrived at Daniel's house later that day, accompanied by a friend. As they entered the home, they were met with a smell of smoke and a scene of devastation. They found Daniel's charred remains lying near the garage door. The discovery of Daniel's body triggered a full-scale investigation. Law enforcement quickly pieced together the timeline of events, aided by the CCTV footage of Sierra and Aaron's shopping trip, and their use of Daniel's stolen credit cards as they fled. A multi-state manhunt was launched to track down the teenage suspects. On April 11, 2021, Sierra and Aaron were apprehended in Salt Lake City, Utah. They'd been on the run for 2 days. Legal proceedings against Sierra and Aaron began swiftly. Both were charged with murder, and the evidence against them was damning. Police uncovered disturbing video footage from a phone belonging to the young couple.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Day 3 after murdering somebody.
Wow! Don't put that on the camera.
It was worth it.
And we had sex a lot today.
It was worth it. I got plenty of sex. So I was payment for doing it.
And no bleeding this time. We got through that. We overcame.
Furthermore, forensic analysis confirmed Sierra's DNA on one of the bloody knives found at the scene, while Aaron's genetic evidence was found on the other. In a desperate bid to explain the inexplicable, at sentencing, Sierra shockingly raised allegations that her father Daniel had sexually abused her in the past. In her letter to the court, Sierra detailed incidents she suffered at the hands of her father that has left her deeply traumatized. But while Daniel's family denied any of the allegations, Sierra's mother, Elizabeth, acknowledged her daughter's allegations. "I will always love my daughter. It horrifies me that our system didn't take the abuse she was receiving seriously before it came to this. My daughter was abused by her father. That is a fact. That doesn't excuse all of her actions. At the time, she was a minor and has taken responsibility like an adult. She's now facing the consequences like an adult." In October 2022, both were sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 22 years and ordered to pay $5,000 in restitution. Both will only be eligible for parole in 2044. Across the pond, another daughter's deadly deception lay hidden in plain sight for years. In the sleepy neighborhood of Great Bedeau, Chelmsford, the McCullough family lived what seemed like a normal, quiet life. John McCullough, a retired college lecturer, and his wife Lois were well known for keeping to themselves. Their youngest daughter, Virginia, who everyone called Ginny, was an artist who had moved back home. On the surface, their house was just another home in the neighborhood, but what was happening inside was far from ordinary. It was August 2018 when John and Lois McCullough were last seen by their neighbors. The couple, both in their 70s, had been living in their 3-story home for over 20 years. Their neighbors, used to their quiet nature, didn't think much of it, and the McCulloughs gradually stopped coming around. Some chalked it up to the increasing isolation brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, which made everyone a little more distant and kept people inside their own bubbles. Neighbors had mixed feelings about Virginia. Some thought she was a bit odd and kept to herself. A neighbor remembers Ginny growing up in that house, but rarely saw her interacting with others. He mentioned that she once told him she sold drawings of horses, but her overall demeanor was always distant. Some locals said Virginia could be a bit much. She was known to be overly chatty, sometimes to the point of being a nuisance. Even though she mostly kept to herself, when she did decide to talk, she could come off as intrusive or a little too persistent. There were also reports of her leaving small gifts for neighbors, which some found strange, given how isolated she usually was. They, of course, had no idea what was happening behind the scenes of the McCullough household. It's believed that sometime between June 17th and June 20th, 2019, something unthinkable happened in that house. Virginia McCullough poisoned her father, John, using prescription drugs, and not long after, stabbed her mother, Lois, to death. For years, Virginia kept up the appearance that everything was fine, continuing to live in the house with her parents' bodies hidden away. She lied to families, friends, and even doctors, telling them her parents were either unwell away on vacation or on extended trips. It wasn't until September 2023 that the horrifying truth began to unravel. While Virginia mostly led a solitary existence, a few weeks before the grim discovery, on August 18, 2023, the police were called to the McCullough house. Virginia had reported being assaulted in her back garden. A female officer showed up and spoke with Virginia in the first-floor living room, unaware of the dark secrets the house held. At that time, the officer didn't suspect anything out of the ordinary, beyond the reported assault, and no search of the house was carried out. Then, on September 13th, 2023, the police were called back to the home after the McCulloughs GP raised concerns about missed appointments. He was concerned about the elder couple's welfare, as he had not seen them in at least 4 years. That's when the police made a shocking discovery. The decomposed bodies of John and Lois hidden away in a top-floor bedroom. Virginia was arrested and soon confessed to the murders. She had been living in the house with the bodies for at least 4 years, keeping up the charade that her parents were still alive. The investigation revealed that Lois had died from stab wounds, but the exact cause of John's death is still being looked into. Forensic experts were also trying to determine if the bodies had been preserved in some way, but so far, nothing conclusive has been confirmed. In court, Virginia pleaded guilty to the murders of her parents in a hearing in July 2024. And while sentencing procedures are still expected, the judge noted that life imprisonment is the only possible sentence for such crimes, though the minimum term will still need to be decided.
Before you go, I'd love to know if you like having multiple stories in one video. Let me know in the comments down below. And if there are any cases you'd like for me to cover, you can email them to me using the address on my channel. Thank you.